The emergency lights in Shiny Side Up's command center blinked with a kind of frequency that suggested imminent death or a really bad rave. Captain Velgren, Supreme Coordinator of Peaceful Mining Operations, a title as helpful in war as a marshmallow umbrella, pressed one of his 3 trembling fingers to the console. His tired eyes stared at the display. Shield integrity, 30%, 28%, 25%. Well, that was faster than a politician abandoning principles. Officer Krina spun in her chair, somehow still managing military dignity despite the sweaty panic on her forehead. Captain, they're sending more drop ships. 50 of them. Her voice cracked. Understandably, Velgren didn't bother swearing. He was long past the part where curses felt useful. Instead, he looked at the tactical display, where tiny red triangles, each representing a chin-borne death kettle, poured down from orbit like a demonic meteor shower. Each drop ship carried 30 soldiers. Each soldier carried a plasma weapon capable of turning a school bus into warm vapor. Quick math. 50 drop ships x 30 crabby invaders equals 1,500 highly motivated bugs. Velgren had, maybe, 200 security officers left. Most of them were part-time workers with laser drills and family issues. The colony's best tactical hope was, apparently, dying inconveniently in places that slowed the enemy down. How long until the shields fail? Velgren asked. Chief Engineer Mork, an old Zetheran whose blue skin now looked suspiciously like the color of surrender, didn't even look up. For hours. Maybe 5. If we turn off life support in the outer sectors. Which kills? Oh, just the folks in sectors 19 through 34. Mostly retirees and the guy who makes the coffee. Velgren sighed. 50,000 civilians lived in Shiny Side Up, a name that once felt optimistic and now felt like a bad punchline. Miners, technicians, teachers, and families had come here to extract quantisite, a crystal that powered faster-than-light drives and apparently attracted war crime enthusiasts like honey attract bees with assault rifles. 3 weeks ago, the Chittenborn Empire had shown up in their standard fashion. Giant black dreadnoughts blotted out the sky, then demanded all the shiny things and half the people. Velgren, like a good galactic bureaucrat, pointed out that Shiny Side Up was a registered outpost of the Galactic Federation of Legal Things and Niceties, that the mining rights were legitimate, and that they had exactly 0 interest in becoming someone's bio-labor farm. Admiral Cragstone, the Chittenborn's designated ambassador of surrender or else, responded with the subtlety of a boot through glass. He atomized the defense fleet. 12 ships and 300 Federation-trained personnel gone in half an hour. Because when diplomacy doesn't work, orbital extermination usually seals the deal. Now the bugs are landing. In waves. And Velgren was watching his polite little mining outpost become a live-action war documentary. He leaned closer to the glass of the observation window. What used to be pleasant housing blocks, surrounded by trees, were now plumes of smoke and grief. Children used to race hover skates down those streets. Now those same streets were filled with the bodies of anyone too slow, too brave, or too stubborn. Any response to our distress signal? He asked, because hope, like fungus, often grows in dark, awful places. Yinta, the comms officer who looked like she'd aged 6 years in 2 days, gave him a small, apologetic shake of the head. Too much jamming, Captain. Couldn't tell you if the message made it past the local nebula, let alone to the Federation. Wonderful. Just then, Officer Krina piped up again, because the universe enjoys irony delivered in multiple courses. Admiral Cragstone is hailing us. Again, Velgren didn't bother rolling his eyes. Let's hear what the Empire's customer service department has to say this time. The main screen flickered. There he was, Admiral Cragstone, in all his multi-limbed, doom-skulled insectoid majesty. His carapace gleamed with the black sheen of someone who flosses with razor wire and bathes in villain tropes. For glowing yellow eyes blinked slowly, like he was trying to remember if he'd already threatened to vaporize this species today. Captain Velgren, the bug thing rumbled. You persist in wasting time. Your shields fade. Your soldiers fall. Why do you prolong the inevitable? Because I still have people to protect, Velgren replied, with all the nobility of someone thoroughly outgunned and still refusing to shut up. Cragstone made a sound like a garbage disposal choking on a piano. Possibly laughter. Protect? Please. Surrender now, and I'll only enslave half your population. The elderly will be discarded. Velgren didn't even blink. Yes, that's still a no. A flicker of irritation passed over Cragstone's symmetrical murder face. In 1 hour, I begin orbital bombardment. Consider it your final notice. The screen went dark. A long silence followed. Everyone in the command center seemed to stop breathing. Finally, Officer Crino whispered, "Sir, what now?" Velgren looked at the dark screen and thought about the children huddled in underground bunkers. He thought of the teachers trying to keep them calm, of the mothers and fathers, shoulders pressed to cold walls, wondering if anyone out there was listening. "We keep fighting," he said softly. "We make the bugs pay for every inch of ground. We protect the civilians for as long as we can." "Do we hope?" Krina asked. Velgren shrugged. "Hope is for poets. I just want to make these bastards bleed." Far, far away, out in the unassuming void of space, a tiny ship's antenna caught a faint signal bouncing between interference pulses and jamming waves. Inside the recorded transmission, a voice broke through the static. "This is Captain Velgren of Shiny Side Up. We are under attack by Chittenborn forces. Our defense fleet is destroyed. 50,000 civilians require immediate evacuation. If anyone can hear this, please help." Aboard the USS Indignant, a voice crackled through the bridge. "Captain, we're getting something weird on long-range comms." Captain Jake Morrison raised one eyebrow, sipped his black coffee, no sugar, no cream, just like his diplomacy, and said, "Play it." And with that, the universe made a terrible, terrible mistake. It got humanity involved. 3 days from the Shiny Side Up colony, aboard the USS Indignant, Captain Jake Morrison stared into the void of space, which by now felt like a second office. A 2-kilometer-long beast of war, the Indignant didn't so much glide through the stars as it loomed. Its dark gray hull bore the scars of 20 years of diplomatic incidents, most of which ended with someone else's ship in pieces. The bridge of the Indignant was quiet. Not serene. Never serene. Just the humming, waiting kind of quiet that came right before something exploded. Communications Officer Pete Collins, young, bright-eyed, and still dangerously optimistic, broke the silence. "Captain, picking up something strange on long-range comms." Morrison blinked slowly, the galactic equivalent of do tell. He hadn't even looked up from the maintenance report he'd been pretending to read for the last 15 minutes. "What kind of strange, Collins?" he asked, sipping coffee that could strip paint off a shuttlecraft. "Distress signal. Weak. Real weak. Bouncing off everything like it's trying not to be found. Origin point, Kepler system. Colony on Kepler 4, if I'm not mistaken." Morrison frowned. "That's out past the Federation's, we'll get to it eventually zone." He set down the mug, mildly concerning in itself, and leaned forward. Pete tapped keys faster than a caffeinated code monkey, and through the static came a broken voice in the common tongue. "This is Captain Velgren of Shiny Side Up. We are under attack. Chittenborn forces, 50,000 civilians, need immediate evac." The message crackled, dropped out, and then came the truly painful part. Silence. The bridge crew stared at Morrison. Morrison stared at the floor like it owed him money. "How old's the signal?" he asked finally. Collins tilted his head. "Based on degradation. 18 hours? Commander Lisa Grant stepped forward. Second in command. 8 years in the trenches with Morrison. Short. Sharp-eyed. Zero tolerance for stupidity. "Jake, that colony's full of civilians," she said quietly. "We can't just ignore it." Morrison ran a hand through his gray hair. "Lisa, you know the playbook. We're a lone, heavy cruiser out here. One ship. One. The nearest Federation fleet. 2 weeks out. If the Chittenborn already stomped the colony's defense fleet, what exactly are we going to do? Offer them a sternly worded letter?" "Sir," came a low, rumbling voice from engineering, "this ain't just any ship." Chief Engineer Bobby Torres emerged from his pit of smoke, sparks, and miracles. He was built like a reinforced blast door and smelled faintly of ozone. We've got quad-core fusion reactors, shield harmonics that can tank a Synflar, and enough torpedoes to start and finish a galactic incident. We're the Indignant, for crying out loud. I could tune her to punch through a moon if you wanted. Grant folded her arms. And you've got a crew ready to do it. Flight Commander Amy Sullivan, already halfway into her exoflight suit, called from tactical. My pilots are on standby. We've trained for every scenario, from asteroid herding to hostage rescues during planetary collapse. This is a Tuesday. Morrison looked around. Every face on the bridge was waiting, not for orders, but for permission. These weren't rookies waiting to be told what to do. These were veterans ready to start wrecking things that needed wrecking. He stood. All right, let's make bad decisions for the right reasons. The crew cheered. Loudly. Torres, Morrison barked, can you cut travel time down to 2 days? The engineer grinned like he'd just been handed a dare. Yeah, but it'll be hotter than hell's sauna in the core room. I'll have to shut down everything non-critical. No gravity in the mess, no showers, no synthesizer meals. Morrison nodded solemnly. We'll survive. What's life without steak-flavored paste and shared sweat? Collins groaned. My bunkmate already smells like a decomposing yak. Consider it bonding, Morrison muttered. Torres bolted for engineering. Alarm started immediately. That was normal. Morrison turned to his helmsman. Set course for Kepler. Maximum burn. Break every speed regulation, and if the engines scream, tell them we're screaming louder. Aye, Captain, said the helmsman, giddy as a teenager in a stolen race car. As the Indignant lurched forward, lights dimmed across the vessel. Inside the ship, systems that hadn't been shut off in 5 years went dark. Hallways lost ambient heat. Artificial gravity flickered like a bad joke. The engines roared like an angry dragon denied lunch. In the med bay, Dr. Dan Rodriguez listened to the bridge announcement, turned off his jazz playlist, and sighed. Well, he said to no one, guess I better convert Cargo Bay 3 into a trauma ward again. He grabbed a scalpel, a stim injector, and a fresh pot of synthetic caffeine sludge. Back on the bridge, Commander Grant sat at tactical, already pulling up old Chittenborn battle data. Let's review what we know, she said. Enemy tactics, brute force, no subtlety. Think a sledgehammer with legs. Armor, heavy chitin plating, excellent against lasers, crap against kinetic rounds. Ship tactics, swarm, overwhelm, intimidate. Basically space, schoolyard bullies. Sullivan grinned. Good. I brought enough pain for everyone. She tapped into the fighter bay control deck. Phoenix Squadron, prep for multi-vector engagement. Dust off those EMP-tipped birds. We're punching bugs, not hugging him. Morrison looked out the main viewport. Stars blurred into streaks as the ship accelerated past safe limits. He sipped his coffee. Still terrible. Still perfect. Collins, send a message, Morrison said. Sir, at this speed, comms range is shot. Signal may not get through. Send it anyway, Morrison said. Even if it's a whisper in a thunderstorm. They deserve to know. Collins transmitted. The message was short, blunt, human. Hold on. Help is coming. Far away, buried deep beneath a burning colony, Captain Velgren huddled in a bunker with 200 civilians and no more hope. The air was stale, the power flickering. Somewhere above the ground, orbital weapons began to charge. Velgren stared into the gloom and whispered to no one in particular. If you can hear me, please. Above the colony, the Chittenborn fleet loomed in orbit. Admiral Cragstone, gleaming, confident, and completely unaware he was about to have the worst week of his life, watched his scanners. All is proceeding, he hissed to his bridge crew. Soon they will beg. Behind him, in the dark between stars, something ancient, angry, and covered in gun ports was screaming toward them at impossible speed. The humans weren't coming. They were already on their way. On the scorched surface of Shiny Side Up, things had gone from bad to we're going to need 3 new words for this. Captain Velgren stumbled as the ground trembled beneath him, a deep, guttural shake that suggested the planet was just as tired of this invasion as everyone else. Another explosion. Another hole where a school used to be. The lights in the command center flickered and died. Again, before emergency power kicked in with all the enthusiasm of a hungover sloth. "Shield strength, 15%, shouted Engineer Mork, who hadn't sat down in 8 hours and was now speaking in hoarse bursts, like a man arguing with death by spreadsheet. Velbrin checked the tactical display. It was somehow worse than before. His defense grid looked like a child's crayon sketch in red. The Chittenborn were advancing through every sector. Fast, precise, and just emotionally dead enough to not mind shooting through hospitals. He pinched the bridge of his nose. Report from Sector 4? Officer Krina was reading messages like they were obituaries. Team 7's pinned down at the water treatment plant. They got wounded. Can't move. Send Team 12 to extract them. Krina hesitated. Team 12 is escorting civilians to shelter Echo. Then they're going to multitask, Velbrin snapped. And we're going to pray Echo still exists in 10 minutes. He wasn't exaggerating. Outside, plasma bolts shrieked through the air with the distinctive zip-hiss boom that every Zethran now associated with imminent death. Those were Chittenborn rifles, 6-barreled cannons disguised as rifles, really capable of vaporizing defensive walls, cargo haulers, or people having a very bad day. Velbrin stepped away from the console and listened. He didn't need sensors anymore. He could tell who was winning just from the sound of the battlefield. His people were losing, and still they fought. Elsewhere in the colony, behind a flipped or hauler and 2 sandbags someone had heroically labeled as cover, Security Officer Tern was holding the line with a converted mining laser, essentially a glorified flashlight with attitude. He aimed at the 3 black-armored bugs charging toward his position and fired. The beam struck the chest plate of the lead Chittenborn, glowing hot, before doing nothing. The creature barely flinched. It kept coming. "Sure," Tern muttered. "Of course it's heat-resistant. That'd be too easy." The battery died with a pathetic whine. "Of course it's dead now." He reached for a spare power cell, just as 3 plasma bolts turned the hauler he was hiding behind in a molten Swiss cheese. The metal turned red. The air smelled like burning fur. "This is it," he muttered. He turned to check on the family behind him, a mother, a father, 2 tiny kids with oversized helmets wobbling on their heads. The shelter entrance was 20 meters behind them, sealed and armored. If he bought them 15 seconds, they might make it. He didn't get the chance to play martyr, because suddenly, the universe gave him Kelson. A mining supervisor with all the grace of a boulder in freefall. Kelson charged into the street, holding a heavy-duty tunnel drill, a weapon that should never be used in open-air combat, and was now about to change history. He activated the beam. The whirring, shrieking, screaming core beam erupted in a jet of kinetic hellfire that knocked 2 Chittenborn clean off their feet and into a nearby wall. The third turned to shoot, and immediately got a reinforced drill bit to the thorax. Kelson grinned. "Come on, we're leaving." Tur didn't argue. He grabbed his equipment and ran, covering the family with laser fire that might as well have been spitballs. But they made it to the shelter entrance. Kelson slamming the blast door control just as more invaders rounded the corner. The door slammed shut behind them with the kind of satisfying finality you only get in action films and very expensive airlocks. Meanwhile, across the colony, chaos reigned in creative ways. Security teams had turned cargo lifters into mobile barricades. Retired miners used seismic jammers to collapse tunnels behind retreating groups. One particularly furious cafeteria worker had loaded lunch trays with mining charges and was, as reports later described it, feeding the enemy. They were outgunned, outnumbered, and had weapons cobbled together from industrial tools and bitter sarcasm. But Shiny Side Up refused to die quietly. Still, the Chittenborn weren't amateurs. They were efficient, brutal, and deeply committed to their goal of turning every peaceful colony into a resource extraction theme park. They advanced block by block, cutting through defenses with military precision. In orbit, Admiral Cragstone watched the battle unfold from the bridge of his command ship, the Dread Stinger. The feed was glorious. Zethran defenses failing, ground positions falling, and the colonists retreating underground like proper prey. Admiral, his tactical officer, croaked, "We've secured 60% of the colony surface." Cragstone's eyes, glowing yellow and devoid of compassion, narrowed. But most of the civilians have reached shelters. Yes, Admiral. The bunkers are shielded. The colonists built them well. How long to breach them? Engineers estimate 12 hours. Cragstone hissed in irritation. Unacceptable. Every hour increases the risk of Federation intervention. He wasn't paranoid. He was just experienced. Ready to deep strike missiles. Load seismic warheads. The tactical officer paled. Admiral, those charges could collapse the entire bunker system. Casualties will be delightful, Cragstone snapped. Fear breeds loyalty. Dead civilians don't rebel. Fire when ready. Back on the surface, Velgren got the update. The last security team had been overrun. Shields were at 8%. The last report from Sector 12 included the phrase resorting to melee, which should never appear in a space-age battle report. Velgren pressed both hands on the console and spoke with grave calm. Broadcast one last message. Emergency frequencies. All bands. Yinta's hands trembled as she typed. What should I say, Captain? Tell them we fought. Tell them we gave everything. Tell them the Chittenborn don't take prisoners. And tell them. He paused. Tell them to remember us. Yinta hit transmit. They had no idea if anyone heard. But someone was listening. In hyperspace, the USS Indignant was glowing. Literally. Inside the engine room, Chief Torres was yelling at a reactor core that was humming like a volcano with a caffeine addiction. You better hold it together, darling. 18 more hours. Around him, heat alarms screamed, conduits sparked, and coolant hissed out of cracked valves. And yet, nothing exploded, which, by human standards, was practically a miracle. Meanwhile, the bridge was fully lit in red warning lights. Commander Grant was cross-referencing Chittenborn battle data. Sullivan was doing fighter diagnostics while trash-talking the enemy's design choices. Collins was trying to squeeze every extra decibel of signal strength to boost their message to the colony. Morrison sat in his chair, calm, focused, waiting. He hadn't said a word in hours, just kept staring at the tactical display. The red dots were multiplying. The colony's energy signature was collapsing. But it wasn't fear in his eyes. It was wrath. He took another sip of coffee, grimaced. Still terrible. Good, he muttered. Up ahead, in the Kepler system, the stars waited. So did a planet on the edge of annihilation. And the thing racing toward it wasn't just a ship. It was a human promise. And someone was about to regret ignoring it. Above the broken colony of Shiny Side Up, Admiral Cragstone watched the spectacle unfold from the bridge of his dreadnought, the Dread Stinger. His mandibles clicked rhythmically as he tapped one claw against the side of his throne-like command seat. The planet's surface below was burning nicely. The shields had dropped to single digits, and orbital bombardment was just minutes from starting. He was bored. Victory wasn't supposed to feel like paperwork. Admiral, came the voice of his weapons officer, a smaller Chittenborn named Hrek. Deep strike, missiles loaded. Seismic charges primed. Begin firing, Cragstone said with all the enthusiasm of someone ordering takeout. Let's smoke the survivors out of their holes. Across the fleet, 23 ships in total. Dark cannons swiveled toward the colony. Glowing energy billed along the barrels of deep strike launchers. From orbit, the invasion had been surgical. Now it was going to be brutal. The missiles launched in perfect formation, 100 glowing arcs screaming through the upper atmosphere toward underground shelters holding tens of thousands of terrified civilians. And then, reality tore open. At the edge of the Kepler system, space convulsed. Gravity hiccuped. Every ship's sensors shrieked with warnings in a dozen languages. Something massive, impossibly fast, and absurdly pissed off dropped out of hyperspace like a boulder through glass. 2 kilometers of steel-gray hull, scarred and armed to the teeth, emerged from the void. The USS Indignant had arrived, and it looked like it had come to collect a tab the galaxy forgot it owed. New contact, screamed a Vorthan sensor officer aboard the Dread Stinger. Size, colossal. Human design. 1 vessel. Cragstone sat forward, mandibles twitching. Human? His tactical officer confirmed it. Ranger class, heavy cruiser. Designation, Indignant. Alone. Cragstone laughed. A horrible, dry sound that made his bridge crew shift uncomfortably. One ship? This is what the Federation sends. One outdated warship and a prayer? He turned to his comms officer. Open a channel. Aboard the Indignant, Captain Jake Morrison stood at the center of his bridge, staring at the tactical display like a hawk waiting for a twitch. Collins, he said, voice low and flat, put me through. You're on, sir. Morrison folded his arms. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earth Navy. You are engaging civilians under our protection. Cease bombardment immediately or prepare for consequences. Crackstone received the message and nearly fell out of his seat from laughter. You're outnumbered 23-1, he growled over the open channel. Turn around and leave, little human, or I'll decorate my hull with your wreckage. The line crackled. Morrison's reply was one word. No. Morrison cut the channel. He didn't need their consent. Commander Grant, he said evenly, you have tactical control. Copy that, Grant replied, already feeding commands into the system. Missile tubes loaded. Point defense hot. All batteries tracking targets. Commander Sullivan? Fighter squadron ready to launch. Orders? Send him in. Let's confuse some bugs. The Indignant's launch bays opened, and Phoenix squadron screamed out into the void, sleek fighters gleaming like angry wasps. Sullivan led the charge in a reinforced model with triple burst cannons and a nose painted with a shark-toothed grin. They weren't here for recon. They were here to ruin someone's whole week. The Vorthan fleet opened fire first. Plasma bolts, heavy torpedoes, and kinetic slugs turned space into a deadly light show. But the Indignant had seen worse. It moved with the grace of something far smaller, shields humming as they absorbed the initial onslaught. Point defense cannons activated, tracking every incoming missile with frightening speed. Lasers lit up the void like a rave hosted by angry engineers. Shields holding at 87%, Grant called out. We've had worse Tuesdays. Return fire, Morrison said, his voice as calm as an executioner's. The first volley from the Indignant wasn't loud. It was elegant. Smart missiles, wrapped in adaptive guidance systems, screamed through space like they had vendettas. Each one curved, dodged point defense, and dug into soft spots the Vorthans didn't even know they had. The first Vorthan cruiser exploded in a double flash, its hull ripped in two like a peeled fruit. 3 more were disabled in seconds. On the Dread Stinger, Cragstone's smugness vaporized faster than his lead scout vessel. What is that tech? He bellowed. His tactical officer looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. They're missiles, they're learning. Adapting. Targeting ship vulnerabilities in real time. Then outnumber them. Cragstone screamed. Overwhelm them. But overwhelming a Terrar ship was like trying to drown a shark by splashing. Sullivan's fighters zipped through enemy lines, blasting open weapon bays, jamming sensor relays, and marking weak spots for the Indignant's guns. They weren't just fighters. They were hunters, and they'd been trained for this exact chaos. Meanwhile, down on Shiny Side Up, Captain Velgren watched the feed from his command center. A single ship. One. Fighting an entire fleet. And winning. Officer Krina whispered, "Who are these people?" Velgren just stared, jaw slack. "They're not soldiers," he said finally. "They're wolves." Back in space, Grant took the gloves off. "Captain, they're regrouping. Trying to box us in." "Boxing in a nuke is a bad strategy," Morrison replied. "Target their command ship." Grant's fingers danced across controls. On the Indignant's main gun deck, twin barrels, each the length of a passenger train, locked onto the Dread Stinger. Cragstone saw it, and for the first time, he felt actual fear. "All ships, protect the flagship," he ordered. Too late. The Indignant's main guns fired. The beam wasn't a beam. It was an event. Twin lances of star-forged light crossed space in half a heartbeat. The Dread Stinger's shields blinked out like a candle in a hurricane. Armor melted. Hull cracked. A command ship rated for galactic sieges vaporized in a silent inferno of fury and math. Admiral Cragstone died with 3 words on his lips. One single ship? The rest of the Vorthan fleet paused, then turned, then ran. Morrison watched them flee on screen. 15 ships scrambling for the edges of the system like roaches in daylight. Grant looked up. Should we let them go? Morrison shook his head slowly. No one threatens civilians and walks away. Not on my watch. He opened the channel. Attention, Vorthan vessels. You murdered innocents. You bombed homes. You had a choice. Now you get consequences. He turned back to Grant. Target engines only. I want survivors. Trials. Witnesses. Yes, sir. The missiles launched again. This time not to kill, but to cripple. One by one, Vorthan ships lost engines. They drifted helplessly, broadcasting frantic surrender beacons. Morrison ignored them. He turned to Collins. Open a channel to the colony. You're on. Shiny side up. This is Captain Morrison of the Indignant. Immediate threat is neutralized. Medical teams and supplies inbound. Hold tight. Help has arrived. On the planet below, Captain Velgren stared at the speaker. A human voice. Calm, confident, unapologetically pissed on their behalf. Krina whispered, one ship. Velgren whispered back, wrong species to poke. The fires had stopped falling. Above Shiny side up, the once unstoppable Chittenborn fleet now hung in orbit like a science experiment gone horribly wrong. Where 23 ships had loomed like vultures hours ago, only 15 remained. Engine-less, battered, and broadcasting surrender signals with the desperation of a student who forgot the exam was today. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Indignant, his gray hair backlit by the eerie blue glow of tactical displays. He stared at the enemy's ships, not with triumph, but with the cold, steady calm of a man whose moral compass had been forged under fire and polished with grit. They're done, said Commander Grant, who, despite having just outdueled a war fleet, looked as casual as someone updating her grocery list. All remaining Vorthan vessels are disabled. Power cores shut down. No weapons. No engines. Just floating. Morrison nodded once. Broadcast to their captains. Collins tapped in the command, still slightly stunned that the ship hadn't exploded during this entire mess. Channel open, sir. Morrison leaned slightly forward. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Indignant. You came here to enslave civilians. You destroyed their defense fleet. You bombed homes and shelters. Did you really think that wouldn't have consequences? He let the silence stretch just long enough to let the weight settle in. No response, Collins said, blinking. Just more surrender pings. Cowards always shout loudest before the fight and stay quiet after, Grant muttered. Morrison turned to her. Disable their weapons systems. Permanently. And tow their command logs. I want every war crime logged, archived, and ready for Federation prosecutors. They're not going back as invaders. They're going back as exhibits. Happy to oblige, Grant said, already assigning drones. Down on the surface of Shiny side up, Captain Velgren stood near the central plaza, stunned as the first human shuttle descended from orbit. It didn't roar. It growled. The sleek, gunmetal vessel touched down like it owned the planet, because in that moment it kind of did. The side ramp extended, releasing a hiss of pressure and the faint hum of stabilizers. Out walked Captain Morrison, flanked by medics, engineers, and what looked like a walking toolkit named Torres. Velgren, battered and soot-streaked, stood with Officer Krina and half a dozen other survivors who had somehow kept things together with duct tape, fury, and backup batteries. He stepped forward, unsure of what to say. Morrison beat him to it. I'm sorry we didn't get here sooner. Velgren blinked. You came. That's more than anyone else did. Behind Morrison, Dr. Dan Rodriguez immediately began setting up triage tents, moving through the wounded like a machine disguised as a gentleman. His staff followed, carrying medkits, trauma stretchers, and an air of practiced urgency. Sullivan's pilots flew overhead, not to intimidate, but to scan buildings for trapped survivors. Each pass resulted in another rescued civilian pulled from rubble, another wounded miner given a second chance. Chief Engineer Torres took 2 steps onto the plaza, cracked his neck, and pointed at a pile of smoldering debris. That your power relay hub? Yes, Velgren said warily. Torres grinned. Give me 4 hours and a crowbar. We'll have his place humming like a synth jazz lounge. Back on the Indignant, Collins compiled the fleet logs from the disabled Chittenborn vessels. The files were extensive, grotesque, and left nothing to interpretation. Tactical plans to collapse bunkers, lists of captured civilians for auction, statements from officers bragging about the efficiency of their cleansing methods. He turned to Commander Grant. It's all here. Everything they were planning. Grant scowled. Good. Let the courts see it. Let every species in the galaxy see it. In the following days, the Indignant became more than a ship. It became a lifeline. Human engineers rebuilt power grids, replaced fractured comm relays, and helped clear the rubble from hospitals. Medical staff worked without rest, tending to over 800 wounded. Civilians who had expected death now found themselves being offered warm rations, clean water, and blankets bearing the United Earth Navy insignia. Velgren, watching it all, approached Morrison during a rare, quiet moment. "May I ask something?" he said. Morrison nodded. "Shoot. How did one ship defeat 24 warships?" Morrison looked out across the plaza, where a child was chasing a drone like it was a butterfly. "We didn't see ships out there," he said. "We saw bullies. And when humans see bullies, we stop being polite." Velgren tilted his head. "Your technology helps," Morrison admitted. "But it's not the tech. It's why we fight. We weren't defending minerals or flagpoles. We were defending people. That changes how hard you hit." Velgren was quiet for a long moment. Then, very softly, he said, "Thank you." A week later, the Indignant prepared to depart. The colony, while still scarred, had stabilized. Temporary power was restored. The shelters had been reinforced. And a massive message buoy, placed in orbit, now broadcast the following in 14 languages. "You are not alone. If you harm civilians, Earth will come. And Earth does not come quietly." On the bridge, Morrison sipped his coffee. This time actual coffee, not reactor coolant with beans. Status? Vorthan prisoners being handed over to Federation marshals at Rendezvous Point Zeta, Grant said. Colonists? Back on their feet. Some literally. Torres says the colony's stronger now than before the attack. And the story? Collins turned in his seat, already grinning. Trending on over 100 networks. One ship, one war. Earth answers the call. The Wolves of Terror. Even got a ballad written already. Morrison sighed. Tell me it's not another space shanty. It is. With bagpipes. He groaned. As the Indignant turned toward the stars, preparing to return to its patrol route, Morrison sent one final transmission to the colony. Kepler 4 colony, this is the USS Indignant. We are departing system. If you ever need us again, call. We'll hear it, and we'll come. You're not alone. Velgren stood at the colony's rebuilt command console. He watched the massive ship fade into the stars, then looked to Krina. Do you think they'll remember us? Krina nodded. I think the entire galaxy will. In conclusion, pirates began avoiding routes near Terrar space. Slavers rerouted convoys. Aggressive empires quietly pulled back from disputed borders. And every species in every council chamber began asking the same question. What if the humans come next?